Congratulations to both Amelia and James for winning their quarterfinal round, so let's give them a round of applause. In elimination rounds at the Coolidge Cup, we flip for sides. We flip with a special Calvin Coolidge coin. So Mr. Ted Baker is going to do our flip. In the interest of trying to somehow make an even way to pick who does the flip, we usually give it to the person who's traveled the farthest. So James has informed me he's from California and Amelia is from England. So Amelia is going to flip the coin for us. So when Mr. Baker throws the coin in the air, you can call out a side. Okay? Mr. Baker, whatever you're doing.
Tails.
Okay. So that being said, in the semifinal round, today in the Grace Coolidge room, Amelia Hayward will be the affirmative and James Miller will be the negative. We have a 5-judge panel today. On my right side is Kayla Brown, then Mrs. Donna Keene, Mr. Ted Baker, Mr. John Kinghorn, and Mr. Gregory Thayer. So again, please be respectful of both of our competitors today. And before I do that, actually, Amelia, you already received this, but do you have the coin? This coin is your congratulatory quarterfinal win prize, but hopefully win you some more in the semifinals. All right, so everybody, again, please be respectful, and we look forward to a good debate. So good luck.
Are all my judges ready? Now finally, is my opponent ready?
Yes, I do.
All right, and I have 5 minutes on my clock, counting down. In 2017, as Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico, foreign ships carrying food and medical aid were forced to wait offshore, legally barred from helping. And but why? A 100-year-old law called the Jones Act. The US government had to issue an emergency waiver just to let life-saving supplies in. When it mattered most, the Jones Act did not protect Americans, it punished them. I affirm the resolution because this outdated law weakens our supply chains, destabilizes our neighbors, and erodes national strength. This leads me to my contention 1. The Jones Act weakened US supply chains. The Jones Act weakens US supply chains. The Jones Act requires that goods shipped between US ports must travel on vessels that are US built, US owned, and US crewed, but there are only 93 ships that meet those requirements today, according to the US Maritime Administration in 2023. Most are outdated, inefficient, and cost 5 times more to build than international vessels, as reported by the OECD in 2021. Because of these very restrictions, our coastal shipping industry has collapsed. Today, just 2% of domestic freight moves by water, despite being the cheapest and most fuel-efficient method, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Instead, we overload highways and rail systems, increasing congestion, emissions, and risk during emergencies. Regions like Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and Alaska are hit hardest. A 2022 NYU Wagner study found that consumers in these areas pay 2 to 3 times more for essentials like food and fuel, due in part to the Jones Act restriction. CSIS concludes that repealing the law would make domestic shipping cheaper and more flexible, especially during crises like COVID or future hurricanes. If we care about resiliency, we must get rid of policies that make logistics harder and not easier. My contention 2, Jones Act fuels regional instability and inflates consumer cost. The Jones Act fuels regional instability and inflates consumer cost. While the Jones Act is famous for high prices in Hawaii and Puerto Rico, places in which repealing it could lead to cost savings of between $5 billion and $15 billion annually for Hawaii, Alaska, and Puerto Rico alone, according to a study by the International Trade Commission. It is also responsible for high prices and inefficiencies on the mainland, sometimes even to commercial extents. According to The Hill in the road salt industry, the mid-Atlantic states import road salt from Chile and Mexico rather than buying it from mines in Ohio and Louisiana due to cheaper transport costs. Well, this is a comical example of the sheer ridiculousness of the consequences of the Jones Act when you truly dwell on it and realize that these American jobs and products being passed up simply because of an archaic law. Other industries, such as the timber and scrap metal industry, also routinely passed up American logs and steel because of the high price of shipping them with the Jones Act compliant ships. The impact of this goes even further when you think about how many jobs could be supported by the increase in demand, leading to an increase in jobs. We may also see that many more jobs in the field of dock workers, ship mechanics, tugboat operators, and many others sprout up. Since these are land-based jobs, they have no risk of being outsourced abroad. My contention 3, the Jones Act undermines our national security. The Jones Act undermines our national security. Neg will claim that the Jones Act may protect our military, but here's the reality. It has helped destroy American shipbuilding. According to the UNCTAD in 2023, the US builds less than 0.5% of global commercial ships. China builds over 41%. And the CBO finds that US ships cost 4 to 5 times more and take longer to build because they face no competition. A 2023 Department of Defense audit warned that the US Sea-Lift fleet, crucial to military logistics, is, quote, inadequate for sustained operations, end quote. And even the conservative Heritage Foundation stated that the Jones Act undermines American competitiveness by isolating US shipbuilders from global innovation. The Jones Act is a relic. It failed during Hurricane Maria, it failed during COVID, and it's failing now. It raises rifles, it stifles trade, it weakens our defense, and harms people both here and abroad. As Colin said yesterday, it is time to let go. For a stronger, more secure, and more connected America, I urge an affirmative ballot. Thank you, I stand ready for grants. Yeah, I'm just gonna do it.
First, I want to talk about this first contention about costs and US supply chains. So you say it's very inefficient, that it's very expensive for US consumers. So what's the alternative in your rule?
Sure, so I'm not offering an alternative, but the expense at which the consumers is just simply not logical to argue in today's debate round because, as I mentioned, there's only 93 ships which fall under the Jones Act restrictions, and it just actually will harm consumer prices in the long run.
So just to clarify, you're going to say that one world is bad without defending your own world in a world post the revelation of the Jones Act?
No, repealing it is the best option. That's because I've just stated the Jones Act itself is inherently bad. So yes.
Okay, let's talk about why that's true. You say that it's more expensive for US consumers. In fact, you tell us it's 4 to 5 times more expensive to produce in the United States. Why is this the case?
It's because the cost of actually making the vessels are cheaper, are more expensive, so therefore they have to compensate that by charging more on goods transported by these more expensive vessels.
Exactly, that's my question. Why do they have to charge more? Why is it more expensive to produce these in the United States?
Well, because we get them from foreign places, so it's more expensive.
Sorry?
We get the materials to build these vessels from foreign places, so it's going to be more expensive.
No, we make them here in America.
We make every single thing on a vessel in America.
That's what the Jones Act says. If you're going to use a ship from port to port in the United States, it has to be US owned, US crewed, and US flagged. So,
sure, a ship can be US owned without being all the parts being built in America.
Then it's not a Jones Act ship. That's not topical. But the reason why it's so expensive is because of labor costs. So you're telling us competition is going to drive down labor costs?
Yes. Well, competition.
How?
Well, competition will drive down labor costs because we don't have enough people working in these industries to compete.
So when the price of US ships is 4 times higher, who's going to go to US shipbuilders?
I can answer that. We're out of time.
Oh.
That makes sense.
Well, I think there's no answer to that. I'll go straight to my 5-minute negative. Is my panel ready? Am I ready?
Yeah.
Awesome. Coolidge warned us that the nation that forgets its defenders will itself be forgotten. Repealing the Jones Act forgets them all. Because I believe with Coolidge's words, I'm so proud to be a negation. But in the speech, I'll do two things. Firstly, introduce a burden on the affirmation that clarifies the context of this debate, and then I'll give you three different arguments. But firstly, what's that burden? I want to make the strategic observation from the first minute of this debate, because it needs to be very exorbitantly clear that the affirmation cannot win this debate by simply stating that the Jones Act sucks, or that the status quo sucks for that matter. They have to logically tell you why the Jones Act causes a lot of these problems in the status quo. For instance, when they say there's very little freight trains and there's very little, freight ships, they didn't actually prove why the Jones Act was the cause. Rather, we see that that decline happened when we saw a decrease in subsidization for shipbuilding industries in the United States. They need to have a lot more logic, not lip service. But also, they need to be comparative. Because if we're only looking at the Jones Act in a vacuum, we're not having a debate. This is just a factual, is it true, is it bad, or is it not? You only know something is bad if it's in comparison to something else, and we'll show you why the affirmative world is that worst world. That being said, my first argument is that cabotage laws are common sense laws. They function in every country that has huge shipbuilding capacity. According to the International Transport Worker Federation, nearly 2/3 of maritime states of the United Nations. They cover every geographic region all over the world. They provide some degree of support for the maritime cabotage trades. In fact, around 80% of the world's coastlines makes up, by the way, this is every coastline excluding Antarctica. These countries have cabotage laws because they understand that domestic industry needs protection. Now let's even look to the three countries who have the biggest forms of shipbuilding. They make up 90% of all global shipbuilding. That's China, Japan, and South Korea. They all have very strict cabotage laws because they know that investment and innovation only happens when protection occurs at the same time. But at the same time, let's not just look at my world, what happens with the affirmative world, what happens when we repeal the Jones Act. Look to Australia in late 2022 when we saw a repealing of their cabotage law. What happened wasn't, magically, miraculously, we see innovation, more competition by Australian firms. No, they drowned. That's the problem with competition. There's only two outcomes. You innovate, you succeed, or you drown. And we don't have the money, the resources to keep up with Chinese manufacturers who can pay pennies on the dollar to their workers and pay very little in labor regulations. That's the world of the affirmative. No domestic industry whatsoever. My second contention then is on how a repeal destroys American jobs in industrial capacity. This is really, really important because we talk a lot about the long-term impacts, but we also need to focus on the daily lives of individuals. The Jones Act employs 650,000 individuals every single year, and it generates 150 billion annually in economic impact. For every one job of maritime, you have 5 additional jobs that are created, totaling over $41 billion in labor compensation. This is very, very crucial because the moment you affirm, you basically pull the plug for thousands of workers, and over time, these are people who have no livelihoods, go home to their families, and are unable to pay the rent and have a roof over their heads. Don't let the affirmation ignore this reality of their world. That's what they do. They condemn thousands of Americans to a life without a stable income and job. My third contention is safeguarding American interests from international tamper. There are 2 layers of analysis under this. Firstly is political interests. We have to realize what the point of the Jones Act is. It's not simply enough for the affirmative to say, look to the status quo. We don't have that many ships. And by the way, we do. We have 40,000 ships. That's a lot more than that figure of like 99. But also understand that the reason we have the Jones Act is to create the infrastructure to be able to create ships when we need it. We have 650,000 people that comprise of engineers, people, dock workers who create the ships, who repair those ships. We have generations of people in the infrastructure necessary to build the ships when we need it. What happens when you affirm is all that infrastructure to repair those ships, to board those 40,000 ships, to make sure that when something goes wrong, they're fixed. All of that goes away overnight. But our second layer of analysis under this is the economic tampering. Because when you have no agency and control over your own domestic fleet, what happens is other countries like China go into your own internal waterways. So those 40,000 fleets become Chinese fleets. That's exactly what happened in Australia. But furthermore, when foreign shipping companies exploit crises, like we see in Hawaii, in 2023, Hawaii made an exemption to the Jones Act. What happened? American shipping disappeared. What actually came? South Korean carrier saw the prices surged by 16%. A Japanese carrier came in, rose prices 9%. The Jones Act, however, forbids such profiteering. They're regulated. They have a legal obligation to the people, the American citizenry, foreign countries don't. And those are our allies, South Korea and Japan. What happens if China gets into the market and takes advantage? Because we help the most vulnerable, the most amount of people. I've never been prouder to negate. Now I'm open to cross-examination for further clarification.
Are all my judges ready?
Yes.
And my judges ready?
Yes.
Okay. So to start, you're arguing that all parts of the Jones Act are inherently beneficial to the Americans and to everyone in America, correct?
No, that's not what I'm arguing. There is no policymaker in the world that will argue any policy is perfect, and that was never my contention. What I did forward to you in the first minute of my speech, I made this very important clarification for this debate. We're debating the debate of worlds. Would you have a world that repeals the Jones Act or a world that has the Jones Act? What we're telling you is that the world with the Jones Act is far superior to one that doesn't have that Jones Act.
Sure. So if we can agree that the Jones Act is not always the best, what part of it would you say is not the best?
At the point at which the Jones Act employs 650,000 people, creates $150 billion in annual economic growth, 41 billion in labor compensation. It allows us, for instance, you talk about COVID, it literally insulated our prices to widen Puerto Rico when the rest of the world saw price increases. When we look to the place, for instance, the Virgin Islands that doesn't have Jones Act protections, their prices are higher than Hawaii and Puerto Rico. All across the board, the Jones Act is pretty good for us.
Okay, and do you have a source that provides that the prices in Hawaii are inherently caused by the Jones Act?
Sorry?
Do you have a statistic on that, a source?
The prices in Hawaii are caused by the Jones Act. That was your
Yeah.
argument.
Okay, next question. So you mentioned that we have 4,000 ships, correct?
40,000.
40,000 ships, okay, and how many are actually in use?
A lot of these ships, a large majority of these ships are working inside the canals of the United States.
Okay, and you would agree that military readiness is very important?
Of course, as everyone would agree.
Okay, and these ships that we have, you say that they are ready for any military crisis that hits?
What we're talking about here is, again, when we're talking about military readiness, which side provides that more? Your side sells out our domestic industry. We have to rely on places like, for instance, Russia and China for our own protection. On that grounds, we reject that.
Okay, that's all my questions. You start writing incredible. I'll stop the time at 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Judges are ready. Are you guys ready? Okay, my judges are ready. Well, let's cut through the noise. The negative says that the Jones Act is about national security and jobs, but the argument relies on protecting an outdated industry at the expense of American consumers and neighbors. Now, the fact that it's outdated and unreliable is not been contested. Well, today's world demands resilience, flexible supply chains, and not barriers that actually will raise costs and stall aid, as I've provided. And I'm here to show why repeal is the solution and not the problem. Mark this down as the Jones Act does not protect national security. It makes us weaker and slower to respond. Weaker and slower to respond. They argue that the Jones Act ensures American control over maritime shipping in times of war, but history and reality contradict that narrative. In fact, the Jones Act has failed to maintain a viable merchant marine. The US currently has fewer than 100 Jones Act compliant ships, yet he stated that there's 40,000. Most of them are aging, inefficient, and unable to meet the demands of modern military logistics. We agreed that military logistics are one of the most important things in this round, yet he cannot uphold them. A 2020 report from the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments found that our sea lift readiness is already severely lacking because of the high costs and reduced capacity that the Jones Act imposes. Repeal does not mean surrendering control. It means allowing more agile, modern, and cost-effective vessels to supplement the fleet that we have. In times of crisis, the government already used chartered foreign vessels under the Maritime Security Program and voluntary intermodal sea lift agreement. The idea that we can only defend ourselves with the Jones Act ships is just simply false. Our real vulnerability is dependence on a shrinking, outdated fleet, not competition. The Jones Act protects industries that are dying, and repeal creates more jobs than it will eliminate. He frames this debate as a battle between patriotic workers and foreign corporations. That's a false dichotomy. The truth is that the Jones Act has not preserved American shipbuilding. It has caused struggle. There are fewer shipyards, fewer ships as we'd agreed, and fewer jobs than ever before. Protecting inefficiency does not create prosperity, it just delays collapse. Repealing the act would allow for the expansion of shipping routes between US ports, creating a surge in domestic logistics, port employment, and maritime commerce. New research from the OECD shows that reducing cabotage restrictions can increase economic activity by over 15% in coastal zones. That means more shipping demand, more freight handling, and more jobs, just in different, more productive sectors.
I'll be running out of time now. Meaning 2 minutes and 55 seconds. Duration. Everybody? One of the doctor's biggest jobs often is not what you think. It's not treatment, but it's diagnosis. Because if you don't understand what the problem is, you can't create a solution to it. This is the key problem and trap that the affirmation has fallen into. As I told you, again, this clarification, the strategic clarification that I thought would make this debate a lot simpler, was that we can't just say the status quo is wrong or bad. We have to explain logically why the Jones Act caused that, and why it's repealing will create beneficial outcomes. But everything we just heard from the last two affirmation speeches falls directly to this clarification I made. There's this idea that we have outdated ships, that our system is not working. And as I told you from my first contention, the problem was never the Jones Act. The problem was the lack of subsidization. I already contextualized this in my first contention. By the way, no engagement from the affirmation. That literally every single country in the world uses some form of the Jones Act that ensures there are protections for domestic industry. Look to China, they have some of the strictest cabotage laws. But what happens when we don't have those cabotage laws? I give you the example of Australia, but this fell on silent ears. We had no response to this Australia example. And this is really damaging to the affirmation case, because all we hear is a lot of theory, a lot of conjecture, that in this world we have a generalized utopia. But unfortunately, we have to be realistic, go back into the world of policymakers. We can never promise you a perfect world. What I can promise you in the negative is a realistic world, where people are actually getting the goods that they require. Let's move on to refuting the arguments made by the affirmation then. This first contention on the idea of weakening US supply chains. Firstly, you're going to turn this argument completely on its head. It's actually the case that the Jones Act strengthens these US supply chains. Look to the COVID-19 example. We literally told you, and this is again cold conceded by the affirmation, that when you have the Jones Act carriers, they were insulated by the COVID-19 pandemic. When prices surged all across the world, guess who had lower prices? Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and Alaska. But I mean, even look to the Virgin Islands example. They're exempt from the Jones Act. Their prices are far, far higher because we have this stable economic zone for these ships to be able to have these consistent trade routes. They're able to be most efficient and create most stable supply chains. But also, why Puerto Rico aren't 2 to 3 times more expensive? I mean, the affirmation asked me where that study comes from. That was your own evidence. Unclear what that question was. But secondly, this actually wasn't true. According to the US Government Accountability Office, prices in Hawaii are 0.5% higher than the mainland. So what does that account to? So my $3 a gallon for here in Vermont would be $3.01. Maybe in California, 6 to 6 and 2 cents. But the point is the same. This shipping, prices being exorbitant is not the case. It's more fiction than reality. On this idea of regional insecurity and undermining industry, you have to ask the question, what happens when we get rid of the Jones Act? Regional insecurity increases because we're forced to go to places like China or at an uneven playing field where we're forced to buy from them. But secondly, we turn this argument because we make so much money, we employ 650,000 people from the Jones Act. That outweighed any other impact of the second and third contentions.
he says that prices in Hawaii are 0.5% more than mainland. Well, if we wanted to take a look at every other nation and point out every good and how our prices differ from their prices, we cannot logically come to the conclusion that it was due to the Jones Act. There are so many goods, so many different prices, and with no evidence, we cannot logically come to the conclusion that that price difference was because of the Jones Act. Next, economic nationalism will sound strong, but it weakens us when it blocks growth, trade, and innovation, as I've stated. Framing this debate as American versus foreign, which he has done, is just a rhetorical tactic, not a sound economic argument. Repealing the act, again, does not mean surrendering control. It means adapting to the reality of the 21st century global economy, where competition drives excellence. US companies will still operate, grow, and hire. They'll just be incentivized to modernize and compete. And ironically, the Jones Act concentrates control in the hands of a few US shipping monopolies. This isn't a broad economic protection, it's corporate favoritism. If we really want American prosperity, we should lower shipping costs, increase port access, and allow for more flexible trade. Next, he still stands by a statement that cabotage laws are the global norm, so it's okay. Well, yes, most countries use cabotage, but that doesn't mean they work. Protectionism is still a bad policy. It is true that other countries maintain cabotage laws, but that's not proof that they're good policy. In fact, countries like Australia, as he mentioned, and New Zealand have partially repealed or reformed theirs due to the high costs and inefficiencies, and the European Union prohibits most forms of cabotage restriction entirely. Just because others do it does not mean it makes sense. What makes the US different is that we are uniquely reliant on coastal shipping opportunities that the Jones Act actively surpasses. Our geography demands efficient maritime trade, and the Jones Act cuts it off at the knees. The fact that others have bad laws is not a reason to keep ours. It's a reason to lead with reform. The Jones Act has already failed to preserve shipbuilding. Repeal gives us a chance to rebuild it on real competitiveness. This has not been contested. They claim that the repeal would destroy the shipbuilding sector, which is apparently the most important sector. However, the reality is that the industry is already in steep decline, which was never mentioned. US commercial shipyards build fewer than 10 large vessels per year, still claiming that there's over 40,000 vessels. That is not logical. Compare that to South Korea, Japan, or China, where governments have strategically invested in high-tech production and outpaced us decades ago. The Jones Act has not saved US shipbuilding, it's trapped in stagnation. Repeal will not eliminate it, it will force innovation. And if we truly care about having a shipbuilding base, as I've mentioned, then we should support it directly through R&D, green tech incentives, and workforce training, not artificial shipping monopolies. Strategic industries deserve investment, not insulation. The Jones Act is not a path for competitiveness, it is a graveyard for it. At the heart of this debate is really one question. Do we want a future where America adapts and thrives, or one stuck defending failing policies? The Jones Act fails us in a crisis and peace alike. Repeal means progress, security, and partnership. For a stronger nation, affirm repeal.
This debate happened on two levels. One in reality, and one in fiction, in conjecture. Where we have no real-world examples to prove our ideas, where we have no actual basis for our advocacy, that is the world of the affirmation. In this speech, I want to go over the final key clash questions that will decide your ballot for the negative. Firstly, who best helps the economy? Secondly, which side best helps national security? And finally, I want to contextualize the affirmations world. Because this was, again, the first thing I highlighted to all the panel, to my opponent. This was the most important thing. A debate cannot be a debate if it's not a comparative between two worlds. The affirmation didn't engage ever in that comparative analysis. But firstly, who best helps the economy? I think this is the biggest issue in this round, as everyone knows that prices are very important to well-being of everyone in the country. But also, the last time I checked, we had over $1 trillion budget for the military, and they have that very covered. We still win on national security, though. But firstly, what does the affirmative tell you under the economics, and where are we really clashing here? The first issue is on costs. I think this is a little bit murky on both sides. Now, the affirmation tells you it goes up by $1,700 every single year. At least that's more than the mainlands. However, the problem with this analysis was I addressed it in my first speech. My study takes into account 200 different products. Instead of just cherry-picking a few products that are increasingly high, we got an average. And using that average, the average was 0.5% increasing in prices. I mean, the weighing here is very simple. Would you take a 0.5% increases in price? Or will you take the unregulated foreign trade routes increasing prices by 1,600%, by 16 times? This was my third contention. When we had Hawaii exempt from the Jones Act, what happened? Prices racked up 16 times. For 3 speeches, the affirmative had the opportunity to respond. And if they truly cared about the prices of the American people, they needed to engage with the most important argument on prices. But there was no response to that. But even if that wasn't the case, my argumentation was very clear in that we added $150 billion to the global economic economy. I mean, 5th graders can do this way. $150 billion is a lot more than that $20 billion figure that they gave you on the affirmative. But also, we tell you that 650,000 people are directly employed by the Jones Act. These are people who lose their jobs when all these shipbuilding jobs go towards China, go towards Japan, etc. It wasn't just going to be benefiting American industry or benefiting the massive majority of people, because for the people who don't even have a job, they didn't care if prices were higher. They weren't able to afford anything in the very first place. But what happens in this world on the affirmative? You see unregulated trade routes, where because these states are unprotected from the United States and our ship routes, like we gave the example of the Virgin Island, again, completely unresponded to. In reality, they have higher prices than places that are protected by the Jones Act. And we see foreign exploitation, because I gave the example of a South Korean company raising prices 16 times. That's one of our greatest allies. What if China gets into the market? Our adversaries that have nothing, no wins for the American people. The second issue on economics then was on the incentivization for competition. This was the affirmative's only actually approach to winning this debate. Their conjecture is that if we have foreign competition, then the quality of American chips is going to go up and costs are going to go down. But I already shut this down in cross-examination when I actually clarified the reason why it costs so much to build America is because of labor prices. There is no innovation that can go around it. There is no ability to go around it. This argument has been pulled, conceded every single speech in cross-examination, every other time and opportunity. So the fact is, if we want to look at the logic, it's very clear negative is so far ahead, but let's look to real-world examples. Australia got rid of the cabotage law. Also, they brought up the Australia example thinking it was a great example. No, Australia literally lost its entire domestic industry. So that leads to our second issue of national security. We have no ability to control our own local waterways. Australia suffered from this problem where China was literally getting information and data on their own country because they were infiltrating their entire waterway. The affirmative world is a world where people suffer, national security suffers. I've never been prouder to debate. And great debate.
And again, then let me just also say to James and Amelia, I mean, it's fantastic that you're in the top 4 of the debaters at this Coolidge Cup. Obviously, the 84 students who gathered here are already exceptional. To be in the top 4 is really a great accomplishment. In this particular debate, the decision is a 5-0 decision with a negative, James Miller. Ooh.
Good afternoon. Coolidge Cup attendees, it is my honor to welcome you to this championship round of the 2025 Coolidge Cup. We are going to begin this afternoon's proceedings with a special song. As you can tell, we like music. And I'm very honored to introduce, and he will be well known to those of you that have participated in some of our other programs, and we're so grateful to have him back today. Coolidge Senator Grant Beck is going to get us started by coming forward and leading us, or maybe not leading us, I think performing. We'll see. Perhaps song breaks out, right? Grant is going to come forward and perform President Coolidge's campaign song, Keep Cool, Coolidge.
Well, if anyone knows the words, I'd be glad to lead us, but I suppose we'll see about that. In a quaint New England farmhouse on an early summer's day, a farmer's boy became our chief in a homely, simple way. With neither pomp nor pageantry, he firmly met the task. To keep him on that job of his is all the people ask. So keep cool and keep Coolidge is the slogan of today. Keep cool and keep Coolidge for the good old USA. While other politicians cannot do a thing but knock, Calvin Coolidge is a man of action and not talk. So just keep cool and keep Coolidge in the White House 4 years more. We have a chance to do it in this year of 24. He's been tried, he's never wanting, he is giving up his best. Keep cool and keep Coolidge is our country's mighty test.
For those of you who haven't been with us for the past few days, I'd like to share a little bit about what the Coolidge Cup is. And if you're a member of the public that has stayed to join us for this round, thank you. Debaters do not often get to enjoy an audience of this size, and you are in for a true treat. The Coolidge Cup is the culminating tournament of the Coolidge Speech and Debate program, which hosts a national tournament series and has a local league and growing into a regional league across North Carolina and the Mid-Atlantic. All of the students here are the top finishers from the tournaments that we host around the country, or have come to us through some of the great organizations that we partner with who send their best students. Those organizations include the New York City Urban Debate League, the Brooklyn Debate League, ASDA, NCFCA, well represented, the New Hampshire Debate League, and Outreach Debate. Good, yes, absolutely. If you are in the audience and you are affiliated with any other debate organization out there that would like to work with us to advance the kind of debate that President Coolidge would be proud of, we would love to hear from you, so please reach out to me. A bit about the competitors, and they heard this earlier, but there are a total of 84 Coolidge debaters here this weekend. The top 2 have joined me here on the stage. 24 of those were seniors, 36 were juniors, 27 sophomores, and 9 freshmen. Those numbers also include our declaimers, and you'll hear more about that in a bit. They came from 24 different states. 20 of them had been here before, and 76 were first-timers. About our topic. The resolution for this tournament, which all of our debaters have debated both sides of multiple times, is resolved the United States federal government should repeal the Jones Act. Over the last few days, our debaters have enjoyed presentations from experts on the topic, including Colin Graybow of the Cato Institute, which has a fan club very much among this group, Sara Fuentes from the Vice President at the Transportation Institute, and Dr. Doug Irwin from Dartmouth College. An update on those side statistics that I shared with you earlier. After prelims, this does not include the elimination rounds, but after prelims, we had 127 affirmative wins and 124 negative wins. So that's a 50.6% win percentage for the affirmative. That is great parity. It should make you confident that the topic was fairly written, which is a relief to me, and it should make you confident in the quality of your judges, because clearly their bias did not impact the outcome. Let me introduce the debaters on stage. And their accomplishment is already remarkable. Upholding the affirmative will be Nathan Chin, a student homeschooled from Washington State. And James Miller, hailing from Westlake High School in California. Our championship judge panel is outstanding, and it's my pleasure to introduce the 9 of them to you now. Your judges for this round are Mr. Bob Luddy, former Coolidge Foundation trustee, philanthropist, and founder of Captive Air. And founder of the Luddy Schools and the Thales Academy Network. Dr. Ben Voth, Coolidge Debate Fellow and Professor of Rhetoric and Debate Coach at Southern Methodist University. Jennifer Coolidge Harville, Coolidge Foundation trustee and great-granddaughter of President Coolidge and Grace Coolidge. Jared Rhodes, founder and director of the Center for Modern Health at Dartmouth, and my predecessor who built this fantastic program along with Matt and Amity and everyone at the Coolidge Foundation. Rejoice Sherry, site administrator for the President Calvin Coolidge State Historic Site, and the reason why I was able to have Roosevelt at the tournament. Thank you, Rejoice. Flora Lipsky, recent Duke Law graduate and current clerk for Paul Barbadero in the federal judge in the Federal District of New Hampshire. Professor Ernest Young, professor of law at Duke University and a former college debater at Dartmouth. Dylan Long, 1890 Society member, University of Miami Rising Junior, who is a politics and econ major, and a 2023 Coolidge Cup finalist. And last but certainly not least, Dico DiCalandria, the co-founder and executive director of the Brooklyn Debate League and a former congressional debater just like me. Mostly for the benefit of the public attending, you should know that this round will run for about 40 minutes. If you're new to high school debate, I want to alert you that there will likely be a few points during the debate when the debaters take the prep time that they are allotted. That might be 60 seconds here or 30 seconds there, not in the middle of a speech, but between the speeches. During any prep time that is taken, I would like to ask for everyone to remain quiet. I will now turn the microphone over to our debaters, but one quick note that they asked me to remind you of. Before they begin their constructive speeches, the first speech that each one of them will offer to you, they would like to thank some of the important people that helped them get to this point today. Please enjoy the 2025 Coolidge Cup Championship round.
Like Mr. Peel said, I think there's, in order, a quick thank you to the people who's gotten me here. Of course, my family back home in Washington, the Coolidge Foundation itself for giving me this really wonderful opportunity to be able to come and speak in front of you and debate relevant issues, I think. A thank you to Mr. Peel for hosting this marvelous tournament, giving us a really nice tournament structure, everything, to the staff, and of course, their judges. Also, big thank you to the catering for all the delicious food, and of course, also to Calvin and Grace Coolidge. 5 minutes? For all ready? Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. In 1920, Congress passed the Jones Act to protect domestic trade by requiring that all goods transported between U.S. goods be built or carried on American-built, owned, operated, and flagged vessels. But in the 105 years since, it's done almost everything but achieve that goal. Just 2 years later, in 1922, Congress commissioned a report that found that U.S. shipbuilding already cost 20% more than foreign competition, despite us having 60 active shipyards. By 1930, that number had climbed to 50%. By 1945, the costs were so high that the Jones Act was waived in the middle of World War II to ensure our supply chain didn't collapse. In 1990, it cost 300% more to build within the US and required 60% more manpower to do so. Instead of thousands of boats, the US had 200. Today, in large part thanks to the Jones Act, it costs 400% to 500% above the market rate to buy a domestic ship. 2.7 times more to operate said ship, of which only 93 remain, and out of 4 shipyards that exist, only 1 U.S. shipyard remains an active order sheet for commercial ocean-going vessels, using foreign designs, build materials, and funded in large part by foreign investors. The kicker is boats require regular maintenance in the shipyards of our sworn industrial enemy, mainland China. This debate is not about national security. It's whether we keep giving in to the fear-mongering of special interest groups. The Jones Act does not protect Americans. It simply enriches lobbyists and entrenches monopolies. Because the Jones Act actively harms the shipbuilding industry, economy, and consumers like you and I'd ask you to affirm the resolution. The United States federal government should repeal the Jones Act. I've got 2 reasons for you. The first is that the Jones Act fails national security. The Jones Act aimed to maintain a ready supply of American mariners and shipbuilders, but here it was entirely off mark. As of 2016, the U.S. shipbuilding industry provides for 43,000 jobs. However, 80% of these orders come from the U.S. military, unaffected by Jones Act protectionism. Likewise, while there are 52,000 jobs in U.S. shipping, the vast majority of which are operations on tugs and barges, they're largely unaffected by the Act. Ultimately, the Act only protects at the very most 8.5 thousand jobs, all the while decreasing shipping output and demand, an economic factor worth over 10 times as much to the U.S. economy, according to the Grassroots Institute. The Jones Act, in essence, artificially values a small subset of U.S. jobs above all else at a cost to the economy. But the Jones Act further attempted to maintain a reliable U.S. fleet that we can call on in times of an emergency. But here too it's failed, partly because of the exorbitant cost to buy U.S.-built vessels. The U.S. fleet has shrunk from nearly 200 ships to just 93 today. Meanwhile, China, unburdened by the Jones Act restrictions, has a fleet numbering in the thousands. Because of this collapse, the U.S. has repeatedly been forced to waive the Jones Act during national emergencies and military operations, because foreign ships, our allies, were there and U.S. ships weren't. The Jones Act oversees an eroding, fading supply of mariners, shipyards, and ships that can't serve our needs. The central proposed justification has simply failed. But that brings us to my second reason. The Jones Act harms the U.S. economy. In a world where the most efficient supplier doesn't win, there's no reason to be the most efficient supplier. By 2001, the Maritime Defense University found that our shipping industry used technology last updated in the 1980s, and our shipyards used designs last updated in the 50s. But it's not just technology and innovation that's lacking. Companies committed price fixing in Puerto Rico, according to the DOJ. 4 shipping companies pled guilty to conspiracy to eliminate competition and raise prices. Without free market incentives, our shipbuilding industry stagnated and prices skyrocketed. The Jones Act imposes costly inefficiencies on domestic shipping that impact consumers like you and I. According to the GAO, Puerto Rican farmers buy fertilizer and animal feed from foreign suppliers because Jones Act compliant ships are simply too expensive. They'd rather sail an entire ocean away and back to buy a foreign product than just buy a product in our own land just a coast away. The Millikan Institute links the Jones Act to the West Coast's preference for importing steel from foreign producers over U.S. mills on the East Coast. Lumber companies in the Pacific Northwest say Canadian competitors gain an unfair advantage due to this outdated mandate. When it becomes too expensive to ship goods, no one buys them, hurting domestic producers across the board and preventing Americans from helping Americans. These inefficiencies also impact us. A 2018 study provided by a private consulting study found that shipping from the U.S. ports costs 151% more than importing from foreign ports. The OECD quantified this opportunity cost, finding that repealing the Jones Act would increase U.S. GDP by between $40 and $135 billion. But the Jones Act doesn't just increase costs, it also forces industries to use less fuel-efficient means of transportation, like trucking. A 2020 study by economist William Olney found that the continual decline of available Jones Act fleet has led to a turn away from shipping as a source of transport, as there simply aren't enough ships to meet demand. The Cato Institute estimates that repealing the Jones Act could save the U.S. $8 billion in environmental costs by reducing dependence on trucking and returning to more fuel-efficient freight. With protectionism, everyone loses, and that's why I'd ask you to affirm. Thank you. Right.
2 minutes of cross-examination. Let's talk about the cost of American ships. Why are they so expensive?
Because America has costly regulations, because America is inefficient. They use designs from the 1980s, from the 1950s. We really only have one shipbuilding industry, and the fact that we have the Jones Act actually incentivizes companies to be less efficient.
So all across the board, what we see are these economists are saying it's because of labor regulations, as you keenly pointed out. It costs 4 times or more to pay American workers. So
One of
in
the
a
reasons,
world
yeah.
after, no, it's the biggest reason. Sure, there's many other
I think we
reasons.
can debate that, but it's one of the reasons, yeah.
Okay, but the fact is, what incentive do companies have to buy from foreign shippers or American shippers in your world when there's no protections for U.S. ships?
For American shippers,
Yeah, what incentive exists for people to go back to the U.S. domestic industry in a world there's no protection for domestic industry?
right, currently there isn't an incentive. That's why it would drive innovation and competition. That's the entire economic theory.
So you're not answering my question. You've given us 5 minutes on why the affirmative world is very great, a world without the Jones Act, or a world with the Jones Act is not a good world. I'm asking you to defend your own world.
Yeah.
What happens in a world without the Jones Act?
Respectfully, I think I did answer your question. They're going to compete, they're going to lower prices in innovation. That's what's going to happen under an affirmative world, specifically and especially because the U.S. industry is still protected under the subsidies that.
So yeah. So
Go for
you
it, yeah.
said yourself that there's like many different companies that are also competing against trucking and pipelines. Is this competition not present?
I mean, I didn't say that specifically, but sure, there is some amount of competition for that industry,
Mhm.
but in waterborne industries, there was mass consolidation in the 1980s, according to the Washington Monthly, so there's a monopoly there.
So if your only example of competition failing domestically is when companies skirt around the laws, how is competition not happening other than these fringe illegal cases?
Right, my point is that it's not because of the Jones Act. Instead, they go to foreign companies, they just buy from different countries across the Atlantic or the Pacific.
Okay, that's not across. So before I start my speech, I also do want to do a few thank yous. I firstly want to thank my family, my single mom, who is not here today, but she's been cheering me on for thousands of miles away back in California, and so she's been my silent but powerful force that has let me be here today. I'd also like to thank all of my competitors who've created very fiery and fun debates, as well as all the judges who are here on a volunteer basis and allowed this all to happen. Of course, I'd also like to thank the Coolidge Foundation for believing in American discourse at a time when polarization is an all-time high. This is essentially very necessary to remain civil and have these important conversations. So thank you to everyone who is here who made this happen. Coolidge warned that the nation that forgets its defenders will itself be forgotten. The Jones Act, and repealing it, forgets them all. Because the affirmation world wants to sell you this fantasy, that a world without the Jones Act is one of great prosperity. But we must be reasonable and practical here, and the Jones Act is anything but. I'll forward this argument with 3 contentions. My first of which is cabotage laws are common sense laws. According to the American Maritime Partnership, they found that nearly 2/3 of the maritime states of the United Nations, covering every geographical region of the world, provide some degree of governance support for the respective maritime cabotage trades, as well as 80% of the world's coastlines, which, by the way, that makes up every country except Antarctica, of course. And so we see that most countries use common sense, and with that common sense, they go towards cabotage laws. But let's look to the most influential countries, the countries that make up 90% of shipbuilding. That's China, South Korea, and Japan. All of them have very strict, very strong cabotage laws. But I've told you a lot about the countries that have cabotage laws. What about the ones that repeal it? What happens when we affirm today's resolution? It's not these great benefits. Let's look to Australia, for instance. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, they repealed the Jones Act. They heard these very similar concerns. It raises costs. It harms the consumers. But what actually happened wasn't this miraculous explosion of domestic industry. That is a fantasy. It is too far expensive for that to actually happen. What instead happened was the free market made it so that China dominated the shipbuilding industry. And so in the interwaterways of Australia, you have Chinese ships gathering data and collecting the foreign cash, contributing to the Chinese government, not the Australian government. That is the exact opposite of the goal of what the affirmation's intentions are. But the second contention is how a repeal destroys American maritime jobs and industrial capacity, because the Jones Act is credited for supporting America's economic security. It has over 40,000 vessels in domestic trade that sustain nearly 650,000 American jobs that generates $150 billion in annual economic impact. And now, I'm already consensed that my opponent's gonna come up here and say it's a different number, and we can disagree around that number, but the fact is, there are over 40,000 of those vessels, whether they're barges, whether they're fleets. In those vessels, they have to hire many people to repair them, to be engineers, to board them, to make sure that logistics flows well. It logically makes sense that hundreds of thousands of people are employed by this industry. They move totals billions of tons of cargo each year and contribute to $41 billion of labor compensation, as well as $150 billion in annual economic impact. But crucially, it's not just about the ships that we have right now. It's also about the capacity to build those ships in the very first place. Once you get rid of the shipbuilding industry for good, it's hard to repair it, and that's contention 3 on safeguarding American interests from international tampering. Subpoint A is on political interests. Because the Jones Act, my opponent will tell you it's not efficient, it's not working over time, it's getting worse and worse. But we have to understand that the absence of growth of the American shipbuilding industry was never because of the Jones Act. In fact, all we have is a classic example of causation versus correlation. Oh, as time goes on, the Jones Act is present and less shipbuilding jobs are occurring. That's not logic. What is logic is looking at what funds shipbuilding. And in fact, in the 1980s, we see a drastic decrease in the subsidization, which actually caused a decrease in shipbuilding and a decrease in the industry that is dominated by the Jones Act. But additionally, we have to understand how are these Jones Act ships funded? As I clarified in cross-examination, many factors, but a lot of them are labor regulations and the cost to pay for labor. Now, it's the affirmative's contention that we can innovate, we can have competition, but if Australia doesn't already tell you, let's just look at the logic. If you are a corporation, are you gonna source your goods and your shipping from a place that's 4 times cheaper? Or I mean, even the information tells you how cheap it is, or are you gonna source it from America? It's very, very clear. But additionally, we have to understand that it's not just a matter of tomorrow is going to be a time where we're going to have prosperity, right? What happens is once you lose that shipbuilding capabilities, you're unable to rebuild it quickly when time matters, when you're in a war zone. We're currently in conflict with Iran, and if we start a war, if we start any sort of conflict, if we lose our military building capacity, we are at stake. But more importantly, in a second layer of analysis is economic tampering. Because when our states are not protected by Jones Act, they're exploited by foreign entities. For instance, Hawaii had an exemption to the Jones Act in 2023. They saw foreign carriers rise prices 16 times, 1,600%. The Jones Act is bound by US regulations forbidding such profiteering. It's because we help the Americans where it affects them the most at costs so proud to negate. And now I'm open to cross-examination and points of further clarification.
Thank you for that speech. Congrats on the finals, by the way. 2 minutes?
You too.
2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, if we're all set. Okay, and y'all can hear me okay? Okay, cool. I'll go ahead and get started. You talked about how cabotage is commonplace within the world according to the American Maritime Partnership. Were those laws as strict as the US Jones Act?
A lot of these laws are just as strict or at the same amount of capacity. I mean, the main, most important part of the United States Jones Act is that they're built in the United States, they're boarded by Americans. That's what, very similar to other things, for instance, in China, for instance, in South Korea.
Aren't most of them just like cargo preference laws? Where's the evidence that they're actually the build requirement, the crewing requirement, and the sourcing requirement?
Sure, I gave you the source from the American Shipping Institute, but
right, but
look,
you just said cabotage.
Wait,
what does cabotage mean?
Let's take this argument at its highest ground. Let's say that, sure, it's not as extreme. That didn't matter because that wasn't
Sounds
a
good.
justification. Wait, I'm going to answer this.
Go ahead, yeah.
It's not a justification to completely repeal the act. You can vote confidently in a negation ballot if you thought reform was necessary. If you thought it was too extreme, we could change some of those qualifications. That wasn't grounds for a complete repealing of the Jones Act.
Okay.
Yep.
You talked about Australia. They repealed during COVID. Did prices go up everywhere during COVID for every industry?
Well, we saw that as China took over the market, right? You don't take over a market instantly overnight. As China started flowing in, you see an increase of the ships dominating the interways of Australia, and yes, because of supply chains, yeah.
Okay. Did they do this ever in the past?
Sorry.
Did they deregulate in did they deregulate in 2012?
Sorry? What are we
Did they
talking about?
deregulate cabotage Australia?
Oh, we're talking about Australia. I'm not sure on that statistics.
Okay, you talked about this idea from the American, 650,000 jobs,
Yes.
$150 billion. Was there public methodology for how they got these numbers?
Yes, so this data was provided to the U.S. government. The DoD uses the data. The very fact that we have the Jones Act is because the people who make
methodology?
Sorry?
Is there a public methodology for the
This is a
indirect
study that was
jobs?
conducted by CWP, which wasn't released to the public, but the government has access to this data. They use that data to make the decisions
one last question.
when it takes
How
policy
many,
making.
how many ships did the U.S. make this year?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I'm gonna start time seconds. there's going to be a 3-minute speech if everyone's ready. Okay, I'll go and get started. Professor of Economics Thomas Grenz writes for the Mercatus Center in 2017 that, quote, economic analysis by individual economists over the last 25 years have uniformly found that the Jones Act is harmful to the U.S. economy, end quote. Why? It's a simple economic principle. When you don't have to compete, when you control the entire domestic market, you have no reason to improve. You have no reason to innovate. That's been true for 105 years since the Jones Act was passed. I've got 4 responses to the last negative speech. The first response is that deregulation stabilized Australia. Again, deregulation stabilized Australia. According to the Australian Department of Infrastructure, they actually did this in the past, the same sort of cabotage requirement. According to that department, the fleet fell 55 ships to 21 from 1995 to 2010. This shipbuilding declined from 2012, but stabilized in 2015. That's when we deregulated in 2015. We deregulated, removed that cabotage restriction from Australia, and the shipbuilding actually stabilized. My opponent basically brought up a study from the time of COVID that prices were increased during COVID, but that's just true for every industry. I don't think this is a very good example that represents the debate here because COVID affected everything. Prices went up everywhere. There's no direct link here. It's just because of COVID. Moreover, to the example of Australia, Australia is a small continent with not a lot of GDP. As a result, they can't subsidize their industry very well. So like what the negative was saying, the effect of subsidies on shipbuilding, they weren't affected there in that sense. Moreover, there also aren't any inner waterways. I'm not really sure where my opponent is getting this idea from, but unlike the United States, tugs and barges are not going to be something affected, at least in Australia. Considering response 2, cargo preference and passenger cabotage remains. Again, cargo preference and passenger cabotage remains. He talked about how cabotage is a common sense law. I'd agree, but nothing as strict as the United States Jones Act. The Jones Act is the strictest form of cabotage that we have. But these lesser forms, these smaller cabotage laws will still remain in place. In fact, repealing the Jones Act returns us to 80% of the world. With lower cabotage restrictions, none of them are as strict as the Jones Act. Response 3 you can tag as subsidies 3 months ago. Again, subsidies 3 months ago. My opponent basically said after the 1980s when we deregulated and removed subsidies, well, that's when shipbuilding really began to decline. I can agree to this. Subsidization is important, but that's what's happening now. Just 3 months ago, in April, Trump passed an executive order that authorized maximum amount of subsidies to the shipbuilding industry. They're going to tariff China, specifically, and this response is his argument of political interest as well, but they're going to tariff China, and those profits from those tariffs are going to go directly to the maritime industry. They're going to also have tax cuts. The big, beautiful bill passed just last night, $32 billion to this specific maritime industry. Why can't we have this with the Jones Act? Once again, it's because of monopoly. When they don't have to compete, they can just take the subsidies and not innovate and just get free money. That leads me to response 4, national security. Again, national security. All of the arguments I've made about national security, about stagnating market, about only having 5 ships built in this past year, all of those arguments outweigh his argument for Hawaii because we should look at the entire United States. Thanks.
my panel ready? We didn't become the world's strongest country by surrendering our shipyards to foreign interests, but a vote in affirmation does that today. Now, I know there's been a lot of arguments that have been thrown through each side, but I want to simplify this question and this debate to one simple question. Does competition work, and how does this affect the domestic industry? Now, this is really important. This observation at the top of the speech is going to be very important because it's the only way the affirmative accesses any of their benefits. They have two different contentions about national security and costs, but the way they access all of those benefits is contingent on the affirmation proving competition works. Quality increases, domestic industry actually thrives. But why is this not the case? Because the only response we get from the affirmation that competition can work is this like four-pronged response to Australia, so let's deal with Australia right now. So we look at 2012 to 2015. My opponent says deregulation caused an increase of Australian shipbuilding industry. That's great. That's not repealing cabotage laws. In fact, in cross-examination, I think this response is pretty telling. The negative is very far in this debate ahead, because Australia didn't get rid of its cabotage laws. Remember, if you are confident that the Jones Act doesn't need to be repealed, or even if you think that the Jones Act needs some reform, that was never justification for its complete removal. That's the thing I told you at the top of my case in the first negative speech. That observation is going to be very, very important because the affirmative has a higher bar to prove why the Jones Act is actively causing harm inherently due to many of these other states that have cabotage laws. And insofar as literally every country in the world has these cabotage laws, the most successful countries have these cabotage laws, I think it's pretty clear cabotage laws are very, very successful. But then there's also this response that, oh, COVID affected Australia, like this is not a big deal, it's just because of COVID. This is actually not the case. When these ships, foreign ships from China are flooding the market, it's not enough for you to say COVID, it's COVID's fault. COVID happened everywhere, but do you know where it was hit less because of COVID? The United States, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, because we had supply chains from the Jones Act. Whereas the entire world saw increases in prices, Puerto Rico was insulated. Hawaii was insulated. But there's also this statement that, oh, Australia is a really small country. It's a pretty big, it's a whole continent state. None sure what that means, but also has tens of millions of people. It's not a very small country. That's a pretty non-response. Now, there's also the statement that we had subsidies 3 months ago. Okay, let's do both. That's exactly what every successful country does in the world. That's not, again, an offensive argument. So then why does competition not work? According to the affirmative, it's because of illegal collusion. Okay, so that doesn't sound like the Jones Act. It sounds like illegal actions cause illegal bad outcomes. If we want to talk about antitrust regulations, that was a whole different debate, but that didn't justify repealing the Jones Act. That justified increasing regulations to prevent collusion and allow free trade within domestic markets. But competition happened just because companies skittered around. That was never the Jones Act fault. For those reasons, I negate.
if everyone's ready. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. No competition equals stagnation. This has simply been empirically proven throughout the 105 years where the Jones Act has been in place. The negative never really interacted with this. He just brought up one example of Australia. In this speech, I want to respond to Australia, give you 3 responses, and give you 1 voting issue. The first response is subsidies. Again, subsidies. My opponent basically said, well, how is the US going to be competitive, especially when we got rid of subsidies in the 1980s? My response is simply, because we have subsidies now. I gave you the executive order that was in April that authorized the maximum amount of subsidies as necessary in order to make us competitive. It placed tariffs on China. That revenue is going to go to the shipbuilding industry. The big, beautiful bill, $32 billion. The reason why we can't have this with the Jones Act is because the Jones Act props up an artificial monopoly. In other words, when the only choice for domestic producers, or excuse me, for consumers, is to use domestic shipbuilding, domestic shipbuilders get to do whatever they want. They don't have any reason to improve. That's why the industry has stagnated. That's why you can't have those benefits with the negative world. This is evidenced by the DOJ. They found 4 companies price fixing. Again, I'm not saying that this justifies more regulation. In fact, it would argue that it justifies less regulation. Introduce alternatives. If companies aren't scared that people aren't going to purchase their products, they're not going to innovate. And if they have artificial demand over it, they're again not going to innovate. My second response you can tag as the current industry protects nothing. Again, the current industry protects nothing. A lot of what the negative talked about jobs, 650,000 jobs. But is this really true? Well, first of all, there's no public methodology to that. We can't independently verify, we just have to take them at their word. There's no proof of this actually being true. All it is a claim made by one industry. More importantly, the empirics, according to the Congressional Research Service, is this. We only have 1 shipyard. We only built 5 ships over the past year. China built thousands. We only have 93 ships from the 80s. This is not an industry that's protecting our national security. It's not serving our interests. It's not an industry that's competitive. Removing the Jones Act would introduce competition, and since we have subsidies, we can compete with unfair foreign competition. This is how economics works. It's a very simple economic rule that's been proven for the past 105 years. Response 3 is small cabotage remains. Again, small cabotage remains. Now, we talked about Australia and how, well, COVID affected Australia, but the US were protected during COVID. My simple response is that domestic carriers were not subject to lockdowns. Again, domestic carriers weren't subject to lockdowns. That's why they were quote unquote more reliable. But once again, that study didn't even test anything. There was no methodology there either. They just basically pulled these industries. Did you feel like it was more reliable? The answer is, of course, yes, because they weren't subject to domestic lockdown restrictions, those foreign carriers. The next thing that the negative talked about was about how illegal outcomes, or excuse me, it's a non-response for a small GDP. My entire point here and his entire point here was that we can only compete if we subsidize competition. Australia can't do that because there's small GDP relative to the rest of his country. My final response here is simply that it's not comparable to the United States. Again, not comparable to the United States. He's ignored all the empirics I've presented you over the past 105 years. It points us to one simple voting issue. Nothing but detriments. Again, nothing but detriments. There's 2 subpoints. The first is the economy, in that it harms our economy significantly. How do we do this? Once again, when there's no competition, the industry stagnates. That's what we've seen for 105 years. Outdated ships, monopolies, we have less shipyards. We only have 1. The industry isn't protecting anything. In fact, they sail across oceans to get foreign products instead of just going down our coast and getting domestic products. We're harming Americans, actually. That's 650,000 jobs, even if it's about indirect jobs, is going to harm even more industries across the entire United States because they can't ship their products cheaply. The second idea is national security. Because we have less shipbuilding, we have less mariners. Because we have less mariners, we have less capacity for sea lift. The fundamental idea here is that if we rely on foreign competition, or excuse me, on foreign suppliers to ship our goods because it's way too expensive with the Jones Act, we're going to be even more reliant on other industries, on other countries for our products, and thus it's going to harm our national security. Thanks.
Is my panel ready? For the final speech of this debate, 4 minutes to close it out. Calvin Coolidge was affectionately known as Silent Cal. He worked in the background, and often his power came not in his loud and his boisterousness, but his quietness, his ability to make an impact. Similarly, the 650,000 individuals employed by the Jones Act, they might not be seen by the affirmation, and they may be working behind the limelight, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. They carry the same power that Calvin Coolidge once did. It's that basis I'm so proud to negate for the final time this entire tournament. Now, in this debate, in this speech, I want to do just two things. I want to give you two paths to the ballot. I firstly want to talk about this issue of competition and domestic industry. I think, again, as we've both agreed, this pretty much determines what the outcome of this debate is, who gets access to lots of those benefits. But then secondly, more of the reasoning why I, on the negative, have won. But firstly, who bolsters domestic industry? This is the most important issue. The only thing we hear from the affirmative again and again and again is there's no competition. This is not true. There are more than 12 different shipbuilding firms. And again, this example keeps being repeated. I addressed it in the first speech. If your only example of no competition is illegal actions by illegal collusion, that is not the Jones Act fault. That was never going to be changed if you repealed the Jones Act. Instead, we passed better antitrust regulation to break up monopolies. But never was there a justification or reasoning as to why that was the Jones Act fault. But additionally, the affirmation thinks that introducing subsidies is this holy grail. Now we can get rid of the Jones Act, and now we have subsidies. I think this inherently concedes the importance of domestic industry. Why can't we do both? That's a fundamental question that hasn't been answered, but let's look to the major shipbuilding countries of the world. What do they say? China, who builds 50% of her ships, does both. South Korea, who builds 20% of her ships, does both. Japan, who does 10% of her ships, does both. It's pretty clear what the answer is. We can talk all we want about the freedom of free trade and competition, how great it is, but we have to make sure it stands up to reality. Calvin Coolidge was a believer in sound economic policy, but if we're just spouting out policies that don't actually work, what are we really advocating for? But also, I also want to mention that the affirmative wants you to believe that competition is the only solution, but that's not the case. In every single country, shipbuilding industries are at a loss. It's not a profitable industry. Competition, if we left it to the free market, this entire industry would die. Subsidies are necessary, but protections are also necessary too, because as I see it, I posit two outcomes of competition. Either A, we see the innovation, we see miraculously costs go down, people start using domestic shipping, or B, they go to China, they go to Japan, because as the affirmative told you, it's so much cheaper. I mean, I think you can ask Detroit how that went. It's very, very clear that the affirmative has no plan to defend domestic industry. All of these defensive, like my opponent gave you 7 different responses to Australia because they knew just how damning that was for their side when Australia had to suffer in the midst of a pandemic and had no domestic shipping courses at all. But let's also talk about 2 other examples completely dropped by the affirmation. I give you the Puerto Rico example and the Hawaii example in my first speech, never addressed ever. What happens when we made Hawaii exempt from the Jones Act? Prices increased 16 times, 1,600%, never once addressed. We also saw Japanese car increase prices by 9 times. It's not the case that domestic industry is going to flourish when we accept the Jones Act. In fact, it disappears. We know this empirically. We look to the Virgin Islands, which doesn't have Jones Act protections. Its prices are higher than the mainland. We know all across the board, the Jones Act is necessary. Whether you look to Australia, even look to Canada, which repealed its cabotage laws, look to the Virgin Islands and Hawaii, all not responded. But even if the affirmation had a very high burden to prove that repeal was necessary, pointing out mistakes wasn't enough, especially ones that weren't related to the Jones Act, like antitrust laws. But if you believe that there's some issues, sure, let's regulate it, let's reform it. But that wasn't grounds for repealing. So proud to negate.
Okay, Bob? Yeah. We have an in-between moment of tabulation. And so I'd like to pick up where we left off last night during the force majeure event and use this empty time to do something very valuable. Coolidge said, "The man who builds a factory builds a temple." That captures the seriousness of enterprise. It does take a kind of devotion that is near religious to build a good company. Some devoted entrepreneurs you've heard of, they want you to know their name. But there are other entrepreneurs who are quieter, are quiet entrepreneurs. Maybe they don't want you to know their name. Well, why not? Maybe they don't think it's so important that you know their name. And one of these quiet giants is Mr. Luddy. He reinvented something all of us use, air conditioning and heating. He also is leading another second quiet revolution, and not just in North Carolina, in education. I don't think he cares too much about his name being known, but he does care about what he's learned and being sure he's able to share some of that. So we did pull together a little book, the one I waved last night. Note the colors, the right colors, green and gold. Summing up what he builds and what's important when you build. So while we wait for our tallies, Bob will just give you a little summary of seeking wisdom, the main points.
Thank you very much. The venue's a little calmer today than last night. Thank you. So I'll make a few comments about seeking wisdom, a few about debate, and a couple about captive air, how seeking wisdom made a difference. So if you think about the ancient Greeks, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, they had far less knowledge than we have, but they were very wise. And we quote them today. We use Socratic methods. We quote Aristotle consistently. And in the more modern world, we have far more knowledge, but very oftentimes our wisdom is far less than those scholars. And we could include others, Aquinas in the 13th century. So wisdom is important because it's how we make our decisions. There was a theme a couple of years ago, and these themes come and go, that knowledge is power. Well, unfortunately, AI and Google have more knowledge than any of us combined. So I'm thinking that knowledge really isn't power. It may be part of the solution, but it's not power. So if we get to a baseline, all contributions come from the individual. So in the modern world, they're saying that, they said this on CNBC the other day, that at some future date, you may be working for an AI site. AI will be your boss. That's how far the thinking has gone, and it's completely ludicrous. So every one of you has a brain given to you by God for a purpose. And if you use that brain as an individual, you will be very successful and you'll make a huge contribution to the world. So how do you seek wisdom? First of all, you need a level of freedom. And America's all about freedom. But you also need a high level of discipline to enjoy that freedom. And if you have a low level of discipline, many of your freedoms will be taken away. You could lose your driver's license, you could be fined, you could lose money financially, all types of things could happen. So freedom and discipline are the first chapter of seeking wisdom. And again, the more discipline you have, self-discipline, the higher level of freedom you'll have in the world. So I have a lot of freedom because I'm financially solid, I run my own business. I also have a lot of bosses. Every customer that buys from the company. So the side of individual contribution is not taught anymore. We teach everything's collaboration and everything's consensus. And I'm here to say that's a lot of nonsense is what it is, okay? And if you look back historically and philosophically, you would find that to be true. In order to be free and contribute, you have to have a good moral character. You have to be honest. Would you buy from a company that you didn't trust? Absolutely not, right? So that idea that all these big business people are all a bunch of crooks is pretty stupid, because if they were, nobody would buy their product. So this character formation, which is a lifetime of work and never ends even at my age, is imperative. Relentless truth seeking. So in the modern world, truth has been abandoned. We don't have truth anymore. Now, this is pretty silly, right? Because truth is absolute and it has no conflicts. So to say that truth doesn't exist means you're fundamentally ignorant, is what it means. So I tend to say things the way they are, and I don't mince words about them. And truth seeking means some of the things we think we know are wrong, so we're always thinking to reinforce and say, find the truth of the matter and live in truth. And when you find out you're wrong, just say, I was wrong on that issue. And people are fine with that. If you lie about it, it doesn't work too well. Emotional intelligence, called EQ often, the way you present yourself to people is going to make a difference whether you're successful or not. So if you're a difficult person, don't expect to be very successful, because you're going to be kind of pushed out. People aren't going to want to work with you. Be honest and transparent at all times. I met a professor recently, and she was so honest. It was just like it overwhelmed all her other talents, that you could absolutely rely on what she told you. And I thought, this is so beautiful. I would love to spend all day discussing topics with this particular woman, just based on her honesty, her transparency, her bluntness. Seeking mentors is very important. And when I say seeking, you have to go find them. I gave some examples to the students today. I heard Adrian Bijan being interviewed. I called Duke University, and he said, I would like to have a meeting with that man. Could you work that out? And they did. And it's 3.5 years later, we're best of buddies. We learn from each other. We have this beautiful relationship. But if I didn't seek him out, he wouldn't be in my lifetime. All decisions made by Captive Air, my company, are based on philosophy. So it's an engineering company, it's a products company, but decisions are made based on philosophy. Now, what would that mean? We will fanatically take care of our customers. If they have problems, even if we didn't cause the problem, we'll help them fix the problem. Exceeding quality is the highest form of quality. So if you provide service more than what you were expected, you're going to have a job for life, okay? Because you're willing to do more. That's what's expected within the code. So always exceed quality, and you will always be in demand, forever. Execution, they said the old coulda, woulda, shoulda, and they didn't do it. Execution is key. You can have a lot of ideas, but if you never execute, nothing ever happens. You're not successful. Lawrence Bossetti wrote a book on that. The book is called Execution. The main thought is the precursor is alertness. You pay attention, you make observations, you take in more knowledge, you think about those things, you make decisions, but then you have to execute. And if you don't execute, it really doesn't matter that you're a good thinker and that you're alert, and etc. And the idea of Clayton Christensen is a favorite of mine. He passed away a few years ago. He's a Harvard professor. And he talked about disruption in common industries. So every common industry in this country can be upset with the right thinkers. That could be any of you in this room, okay? And what he said was, I don't use the words creativity and innovation anymore, because I don't know what they mean, because everybody says I'm innovative, I'm thinking outside the box. It's a riddle in my mind, okay? Because thinking is complicated. and takes a very long period of time. So seeking wisdom, trying to improve yourself, is a lifelong task. I'll be 80 next week. I'm still reading books. I'm still going to debates. I'm still learning, because as you get older, you have the capability of making a higher contribution because you spent your whole life to learn these things. If you don't do anything with them, then you've squandered that opportunity. But in order to do it, you have to continue to learn. You have to continue to adapt. So adaptability is a key part of entrepreneurship. Adrian Bijan, my friend, had the chutzpah to write his own law of physics, which he calls the constructural law. It's a word he made up, if you wonder where it came from. And the essence of it is the natural world is dynamic. It continues to move. He calls it flowing like a river, growing like a tree. You can't stop it. So you have to continue to grow your whole life to keep up with the world. So for you young students, in my lifetime, things move slower. We had less international competition. In your lifetime, because of technology, that dynamic of flow is going to be much more rapid. So you're going to have to continually adapt throughout your lifetime. And if you don't, you'll be left behind. That's a decision you're making. Many people end up being 40 years old and have a midlife crisis because they didn't execute. They didn't work on their dream. And now they realize maybe I'll never realize it. So it's very important that at a young age that you're learning, you're growing, you're debating, and you're improving, and you're making a contribution. Because that time will go by quickly. And I don't want you to be 40 years old and have a midlife crisis, or be 50 years old and lose your job because the new technology has come along and made it obsolete. Ideas are more important than money. Captive Air was started with basically no money. It's a large manufacturing billion-dollar company. It's cash rich. It generates cash. It doesn't borrow any money. Okay, so what did that prove to me? The ideas we have and the way we approach the industry were way more important than venture capital. They're way more important than the conventional wisdom. Ideas are important, and ideas drive the world. It was mentioned earlier today. I think Mr. Keene mentioned it. Ideas drive politics. They drive everything in the world. And ideas germinate slowly over a long period of time, and they're hard to make changes, but over time they are changed. Bain and Company came up with an interesting observation, and they said that entrepreneurs are fundamentally at war with their industry. So some years ago, one of our sales guys called up and said, "Bob, fundamentally you don't understand the kitchen ventilation industry." I said, "Well, I think I understand it. I don't like it. I don't think anything they're doing makes any sense." And he was like, "How can you say that about our industry? Like, are you in love with this industry?" I'm not. See the difference in thinking? So by observation, common sense, we eventually came up with what we called the maze of gimmicks within the kitchen ventilation industry. And we listed them and we presented them in our seminars around the country. And we completely disabused the market of all these silly ideas that never made any sense. And we did it with a little bit of humor, in a nice way, high EQ, right? And we destroyed them by just saying your ideas don't make any sense. They never made any sense. Here's the right way to do it. So rejection of the status quo is part of entrepreneurship. Fanatical focus on customers is part of entrepreneurship. Did anybody ever hear of strategic planning? Captive Air does not do any strategic planning, okay? We don't have a strategic plan. Any plan that we have, if it can't be written in 2 paragraphs, what we're going to do for the next 5 years, then we need to get new leadership. So Captive Air we came up with simple themes. In the HVAC business, we're going to control the whole building. We're going to make every piece of technology in the building related to HVAC, the air distribution, the controls, the monitoring, the big boxes. That's a powerful theme, and that means we went from X sales to 5X sales on every building we approach. Now, to get that done, there is resistance. There's a high resistance to change. That's the mission. How do you figure out how to do that? So no strategic plan. All senior leaders have real jobs. They do real jobs all day long, and they also have to manage and they have to lead. So we don't have any prima donnas sitting around in a room bossing other people around. It keeps them grounded in the real world. We have no production planners. We have no estimating department, because we've simplified these things to be dirt simple, and that makes us more efficient. How do we judge efficiency? Captivere produces $500,000 in sales for every employee. Our competition produces between $200,000 and $300,000. So we have this massive advantage in terms of cost, which means we can sell at a lower cost, a higher quality, and they can't match that cost unless they change their whole management system. We have no finished goods inventory, so we don't make anything until it's sold, and then we make it lightning fast. And it's made in a day and put on a truck, and we send you a bill. Okay? So that gives you a high level of cash flow. What were the restrictions that held us back over the years? National Fire Protection Code 1970, most of it made no sense whatsoever, but it's the law, it's the regulation, it's the code. Well, most people in our industry say, well, I understand the code and I do it by the code. And I said, you ought to take that code book and throw it in the garbage can, because it doesn't make any sense. And so we found ways and means of moving past the code over a period of years. And eventually what happened is the code just followed us. I said, we're not going to go waste time to change the code. That's a long-term thing. The code will follow what we do. So essentially, we're able to completely change the kitchen ventilation industry gradually, and the code followed. So we already talked, we're at the industry. We have standards with no equivocations. In the modern world, everything, the tariffs are not good, but under certain circumstances they're good, and maybe this and maybe that. No, they're no darn good, okay? We don't equivocate on what we believe. Every problem has a solution, told to me by my mother, and she added, it's your job to figure out the solution. Virtuous, creative servant leaders change the world over time. You need to have a personal vision and work on that vision, and it can change over time, but you need to have a vision. Professional life requires high standards and protocols, and you can't be sloppy about it, and you have to constantly be improving. And continuous learning is absolutely vital. Commitment to truth, focus on the customers. Many companies say, well, we provide value according to the company, right? That means nothing. The user decides, your boss, the people who buy your product, decide if you're providing value. They are the arbitrators of value. That was established by Karl Menger at the University of Vienna, 1781, and the Germans said he was an idiot, but it turned out to be the right answer, and you have a whole school of economics called the Austrian School. So entrepreneurs think differently. They're not encumbered by the status quo. Okay, they're not all locked up. They don't believe in collaboration. We believe in cooperation. We believe every individual has value, every individual can and does contribute, and we do it by cooperating toward common goals. Not very complicated, right? So every one of you has an enormous opportunity in your life. You're taking advantage of that opportunity by being here and being in the Coolidge debate. And I commend everyone for you. You could be out looking at fireworks, but you're actually doing this personal development, which is recommended in the book. So a little bit about debate. You can have the greatest ideas in the world. If you cannot communicate them, then you're the only one that has that idea. And it's not going anywhere, right? So debate is how you learn those skills of communication. We've got two great debaters here tonight. We basically live in a free country. It's constrained by regulation So I told some students earlier today, try to avoid being in a highly regulated industry. Being prepared for the future is a big part of debate, because when it comes time to debate, you have to have those skills, you have to have that knowledge, you have to be prepared. Most people, most of the time, aren't prepared, and that puts you at a disadvantage. And the ones who are prepared are going to be the winners. So debate develops strong devices, skills, capabilities, truth-seeking, ability to communicate, and it's a very, very important long-term skill. So I commend every debater. I would encourage you to continue to do this. And just in closing, debate improves thinking skills, writing skills, and research skills. And that's the whole basis of improvement. It requires clear decision, logic, and humility. And if you don't have humility, you're not going to learn anything and you're not going to grow. So no matter how high you go, you have to maintain that humility. That's how you keep growing. Debate reminds you in a very competitive world. When I was a sophomore in high school, I was having a bad year, and my dad said, you have two choices. You can go sit in the corner with your crying towel, or you can get up and compete. I said, Dad, I got it. Okay, so I learned how to be a competitor, and I'm probably, in that time frame, I was not a very good competitor. So sometimes some harsh words, some true words change our life. So make the most of your rating, your thinking skills. Learn how to be a good writer. Learn how to be a good communicator. Learn how to be a good debater. We're proud of every one of you. God bless you. I wish you a great future. You're off to a good start. Keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luddy. We are going to take 60 seconds. These gentlemen are trapped on stage. I'm going to let them get down. And so a stretch break in place, and then we will begin our award ceremony. Should we take yes, take this. Is going to be flowing across in this direction. I'm going to stand at the lectern on that corner. All right, if you'll please make your way back to your seats, we'll get started. All right. Thank you all for a great day of competition. And we do have one more very important speech for you to hear before we begin the award ceremony proper, although I will be revealing some very important information so that this speaker knows to come forward. And that is our Declamation Victory Lap speech. So, to recap, Declamation is a speech event at the Coolidge Cup, and our speech competitors deliver the speeches of President Calvin Coolidge. We've all been treated to some fine declamation showcases over the last several days by our competitors. In addition to that, they have competed in 6 smaller preliminary rounds in front of judges and have also competed in front of these big audiences, here in the big tent, in the church, and at other venues. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we've been moved and inspired by hearing President Coolidge's words interpreted by our young declaimers. And I think we've all been impressed at how relevant those words continue to be. At this moment, our 12 declamation students, along with the rest of us, are waiting to hear that winner, and I'm not going to withhold it from you much longer. The student's name, who I will call, after which I'm sure there will be a hearty round of applause as they make their way to the stage, will come up here for that victory lap speech, which will be a Coolidge speech excerpt of their choice. This is not scored. That scoring, of course, has already happened. So, all Coolidge Cup attendees, I present to you the winner of the 2025 Coolidge Cup for Declamation, and we will recognize all of our declamation students later in the program. That winner is Christopher Pinto Spiegel from South Joseph High School in New Jersey.
Let's get to the speech, but first, some importance behind it. I will be declaiming Education, the Cornerstone of Self-Government. And this meant a lot to me. Both my parents are educators. They've been for well over 25 years. My mother is a guidance counselor, and my father's an assistant principal. My mother couldn't make it here, but she spent, plenty of hours hearing my speeches. Probably was not the most entertaining thing to do on a Saturday evening, but she did a lot of work with me and to my father, who had the 4-hour drive with no stops. I don't know how he did it, but I'm eternally grateful. So without further ado, my victory lap speech. If the pages don't blow away. America is turning from the mere thought of the material advantage to a greater appreciation of the cultural advantage of learning. It is coming to be valued more and more for its own sake. People desire not only the intelligence to comprehend economic and social problems, but they are finding increased leisure is little more than time wasted in indulgence, unless an opportunity for self-development and self-expression has been provided in youth by the cultivation of a taste for literature, history, and the fine arts. Teaching is one of the noblest of professions. It requires an adequate preparation and training, patience, devotion, and a deep sense of responsibility. Those who mold the human mind have wrought not for time, but for eternity. The obligation which we owe to all those devoted men and women who have given of their lives to the education of the youth of our country, that they might have freedom through coming into a knowledge of the truth, is one which can never be discharged. They are entitled not only to adequate rewards for their service, but to the veneration and honor of a grateful people. The encouragement and support of education is peculiarly the function of the several states. While the political units of the district, the township, and the county should not fail to make whatever contribution they are able, nevertheless, since the wealth and resources of the different communities vary, while the needs of the youth for education in the rich city and in the poor country are exactly the same, and the obligations of society toward them are exactly the same, it is proper that the state treasury should be called on to supply the needed deficiency. The state must contribute, set the standard, and provide supervision if society is to discharge its full duty not only to the youth of the country, but even to itself. The cause of education has long had the thoughtful solicitude of the national government. While it is realized that it is a state affair rather than a national affair, nevertheless, it has provided by law a Bureau of Education. It has not been thought wise to undertake to collect money from the various states into the national treasury and distribute it among the various states for the direct support of education. It has seemed a better policy to leave their taxable resources to the states and permit them to make their own assessments for the support of their own schools in their own way. But for a long time, the cause of education has been regarded as so important and so preeminently an American cause that the national government has sought to encourage it, scientifically to investigate its needs and furnish information and advice for its constant advancement. Pending before Congress is the report of a committee which proposes to establish a Department of Education and Relief to be presided over by a cabinet officer. Bearing in mind that this does not mean any interference with the local control, but is rather an attempt to recognize and dignify the importance of educational effort, such proposal has my hearty endorsement and support. It is thus that our educational system has been and is ministering to our national life. Our country is in process of development. Its physical elements are incomplete. Its institutions have been declared, but they are very far from being adopted and applied. We have not yet arrived at perfection. We are not yet free, but we are struggling to become free, economically, socially, politically, spiritually. All of these movements are in the direction of increased national freedom and an advance toward the realization of the vision of Washington and Lincoln. A new importance is attaching to the cause of education. A new realization of its urgent necessity is taking hold of the nation. A new comprehension that the problem is only beginning to be solved is upon the people. A new determination to meet the requirements of the situation is everywhere apparent. The economic and moral waste of ignorance will little longer be tolerated. This awakening is one of the most significant developments of the times. It indicates that our national spirit is reasserting itself. It is a most reassuring evidence that the country is recovering from the natural exhaustion of the war, and that it is rising to a new life and starting on a new course. It is intent as never before upon listening to the word of the teacher, whether it comes from the platform, the schoolhouse, or the pulpit. The power of evil is being broken down. The power of truth is reasserting itself. The Declaration of Independence is continuing to justify itself. Thank you all so much. Thank you all. Thank you. What next?
Thank you for judging all week. Chris, I am also the child of two educators, so I very much relate to your experience. I'm sure we can trade war stories. Hilariously, my parents used to say around the dinner table that they would send me to college to be anything I wanted to be except a teacher, not because they didn't love their job, but because they wanted me to earn more and to have better leadership above me. And then sure enough, that's what I ended up doing for 14 years. Some act of rebellion. I work with some amazing people, and the next thing I'm going to do is turn the microphone over to one of them to share a few words of encouragement and perspective with the students who competed here this weekend. But as I do so, I have to acknowledge him as one of the intellectuals behind the Coolidge debate movement, and for me, on a personal level, a calming force, because it can be very stressful running tournaments. And Ben will always do two things. He will always say yes when asked to assist in some way, and he will always listen empathetically whenever you are having a bad moment. So let's recognize Dr. Ben Voth as he comes forward to share with you.
Well, I do not want to delay us too much this evening. I do want to say thanks to Jonathan and to Matt Denhart, Amity Schlaze, and for the entire Coolidge Foundation staff for their support for the debate and declamation contest. I mean, they're an amazing thing. This is my 13th year to actually come up here and do this. And every year it's just overwhelming and stirring. The quality and the ability is very impressive to me, and I've literally traveled the world to see this kind of thing. But I always say the same thing every year, and if you've been here, you've known this. But you know, we're gonna take an inventory of this hardware over here, and then we're gonna identify the best of the best, and you're gonna get to look at your ballots. And there's always a risk in my mind, as an educator, as we've been talking about, that you might look at your record and you would say, "Well, I lost all my debates." Or I finished last in, declamation. And perchance that thought can emerge, I have wasted my time. Nothing could be further from the truth. Every person has done an amazing thing by being here and giving the effort to compete. Everybody has won in every effort and strain. And there's not really a better day than the 4th of July to think about, especially with regard to speech and debate, that you would have the courage to express your ideas. Mr. Luddy talked about how ideas go nowhere when they cannot be expressed. But in so many parts of the world, many of you know I just came from Nigeria to teach debate, many people live in abject, radical fear to share their ideas. And we take it for granted that we could do that here. But the fact that you had the courage and that you would go home and continue with that courage is more important than these cups or these checks or these cash. And what you need to go home with more than those things that we're about to give out is just the passion that what you did here was worthwhile and good and affirming, even to your entire human community. The entire world envies your precious liberty and freedom that we celebrate today, and we laugh about it, and we think maybe it would just always be that way. I can tell you, just a week from Abakaliki, Nigeria, the bitter tears falling on hard soil, wanting to have a world like yours. And I fight with them in those places for that. No one has lost here at the Coolidge Cup. And I want to make sure everybody leaves with that clear conviction, and that you would leave here with the most important thing, a conviction that this was valuable, and I ought to go home and encourage the very same thing with every friend I encounter, every neighbor I meet. Because it is only a network of speech and debate that can lift humanity out of the pain and the suffering and the injustice and the inequality that we all know about. But it's the network of better ideas that can make human societies better. Calvin Coolidge was not a national champion of debate. He was simply someone who experienced the power of debate, and it drew him into leadership. And there are many historical examples that bear that out, and I won't bore you with those. But I hope that everybody leaves this tent and goes home tomorrow with that deep conviction that is the real trophy beyond the ones that we're about to hand out. So thank you so much for your time and attention and your really great effort.
I'm going to do two things while they're on my mind now because I'm bound to forget something that I immediately regret after this, and so at least I can get these out of the way. I've just been handed what appears to be a camera part, but it reminds me that we do have a fairly large lost and found that we have assembled over the course of the competition days. So I have this here. The other items are in the office. If you have lost something of value to you, be that monetary or sentimental, and you would like to try to be reunited with it, immediately following this awards is probably your best opportunity. So you can join me in making your way downstairs here in the visitor center and see if your item perhaps has been turned in. Some photo instructions is the other thing I'm terrified about forgetting. We would love to capture some photos of our winners, and so let's talk a little bit about how to navigate this stage. When you are called to receive your award, if you will enter over here, you will receive it from one of our 1890 members who are standing here, and perhaps be greeted by some of our leadership. And then you will exit from these stairs, but before you return to your seat, if you will visit with Reina, she will be very happy to take your photo, and we would be very, very happy to give you some shine on our social media channels and website, so please do that. As I reflect on Ben's speech, one of the things that drew me to this position is that the vibes are so good. I give Jared a ton of credit for that. When I visited last year, I had never been to a debate tournament where people choke up like this. I've done it today. Ben's done it today. Amity was doing it while I was sitting next to her. And it is so different than so much. I know if you compete in other circuits, than so much of the rest of the speech and debate world. And I'm proud of that. And we're going to work very, very hard to keep that. It's good for me because some of that blood is on my hands from back in the day. This makes me a better person. I hope it makes you a better competitor too. There are thank yous, but I know because of the attitude that you're brought to this tournament that you also want to express your gratitude as we go through. In the denomination where I'm a member, the United Methodist Church, the membership vows ask for our faithfulness in prayers, presence, gifts, and service. And so many people this week have supported our tournament in those ways. I have to start with our entire pool of judges, and I wish that I could name every single one of you. But if you judged at any point, any event over the course of our tournament, if you will please stand for recognition, and we students definitely want to share that with our judges. Thank you, judges. At the last school I served, Charlotte Latin, I shared an office with the theater director, and his curtain speech always said that it's not theater until there's an audience. Well, it's also not a speech and debate tournament until there are competitors. And we work very, very hard to bring you here, and we always worry a little bit that we're pouring all of this effort and resources into these competitions and no one is going to come. So we at the foundation are truly grateful, competitors, that you took time out of your summer to join us for this tournament. So we want to thank you. I want to thank Rejoice Sherry and the Vermont Department of Historic Preservation for opening this historic site to all of us and sharing their spaces, facilities, and grounds year after year. Rejoice's staff includes Carolyn Milikowski, Paula Farrow, we can one clap it, that's great. Jackie Schmidt, Bruce Bishop, Camden Simpson, Sarah Calvin, Nathan Turowski, Jim Hogan, Kathy Kamenetsky, Kathy Jacob, Lou Farrow, David Balfour, Sue Polinder, and I want to particularly call these folks out because they so often toil in obscurity, and that is wrong. The custodians and grounds crew, Ursula DePaul and Andy Crossman. I want to thank the coaches who are here. We have many entries that travel to Coolidge competition, and we love this. It is part of our mission to be open to students who do not have the support of coaches, but we are grateful for the schools and coaches that travel as well and very much open to that. So coaches, thank you for accompanying your students and for all the effort that you have given them over the last several days and years. We enjoy a remarkable amount of support from the surrounding community, our donors, and our trustees who make time to be here over the course of the tournament. These folks could have been at the Cape, they could have been at the golf course, but instead they chose to spend their holiday weekend right here with you in Plymouth Notch. I am especially grateful for their perspective on you, the youth of this country. Too many of our neighbors leer through their windows at the kids outside and assume the worst. But our supporters, they invite them in and they listen. And come to think of it, I can think of another historical figure instead of keeping the company of the rich and powerful, called the children to him. Your example is indeed Christ-like. Thank you to our donors who make this possible and everybody who gives a part of themselves to support the work of the Coolidge Foundation. There are many thank yous, so stay with me, we're getting there. I'd like to thank the Coolidge Scholars, and I encourage all of you who are rising seniors to apply. If you've missed it, I'm sorry, I've had some sad conversations. Rising, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Rising Juniors, that's right, because you find out before you apply, because that award is highly likely to change the list of places that you might deem to be within you and your family's reach. So, joining us and supporting the tournament in so many ways, Cooper Beckman, Juliana Jones, Uliana Kabini, Mary Kaufman, and Paul Mackay. I'd like to give a special thanks to the members of the 1890 Society, and in just a moment we're going to add to their ranks. They are indispensable in helping us run this tournament fairly, accurately, and efficiency, and being really, really gracious when I am barking out orders and forgetting to say please and thank you. They are Cyrus Ariani, Hope Ariani, Caleb Brown, Dylan Long, Justin Marwad, and Zach Stoyer. We have 3 interns who have joined us, and I guarantee you that when they hear their peers that are working at Bain or McKinsey, they are saying that they're having a slightly different experience as they roll tables across the grass or take out the trash. We have them intellectually engaged too, but we're definitely a roll-up-your-sleeves kind of organization, and I want to thank them for always saying yes over the course of the weekend as well. Audrey Bay, Chris Raker, and William Wang. My colleagues at the Coolidge Foundation are Nancy Almasi, Tammy Bowen, Rob Hammer, Reina Mainetti, Jacob McNeil, William Pettinger, Colleen Stamos, Ben Voth, and our leadership, Matt Denart and Amity Schlaze. Mr. Luddy, as I listened to your wisdom, I was thinking of another way to phrase that is, do the people around you make your job easier? And if you're in an organization where you can say that the answer is yes, that's a big deal. And I can confidently say that here the answer is yes. There is one colleague, I've already gushed about Ben, and there is one colleague that didn't make that list, and I'm so sad that he is not here to hear this right now because he has fallen ill today. And the reason he has fallen ill today is because he gave his last full measure of devotion on the battlefield of this tournament yesterday. And it is 100% true that we would not have been able to get through as many rounds as we were able to yesterday, and thus be set up for success today in concluding this tournament roughly on time. It's only because I'm taking so much time to indulge myself here in these thank yous probably that we're not going to finish on time. And that is Joe Webb. Yes. Joe is a former debater, a Yale graduate, and he could be doing lots of other things with his time right now, but he has chosen to work with the foundation. I am grateful for the support that enables us to double our capacity. Joe came on board in January, and it is already leading to a rapid expansion of our program, and I look forward to continue working with Joe to do that. He is fantastic, and it is no easy task to sit next to me all the time and work on this, and he also does it with grace and good humor. Joe keeps me laughing and laughs at my jokes, which I appreciate. All right. And I want to thank our board members and trustees, in particular, Mr. Bob Luddy, whose support is absolutely essential to make this event possible. We would not be able to bring you all here and help assist with that process or present the awards that we are able to share with you, except for the fact that he deeply believes in what you are doing. Please join me in thanking Mr. Bob Luddy. Now I transition to thinking about the opportunities for the 1890 Society. And before I induct our new members, I am pleased to say that one of the partners I have been so thrilled to get to know over the course of this year, and we share a vision and passion for better speech and debate for far more students, and that is Deco DeCalandria, who would like to invite all of the graduates who are in the crowd to join in a unique opportunity.
Friends, I promise that I will be quick because I know we have some hardware over there that needs getting to. But I also want to acknowledge that, like Dr. Voth mentioned, the vast majority of students from this tournament and from every debate tournament don't leave with something shiny. They leave with some papers, or in these days, some e-ballots. And I'd like you, students, to raise your hand if you ever got a ballot that was like, amazing, perfect, you could be national champion, loss. Right, keep your hands up if that was frustrating to you. Awesome. Okay, so I bring that up because at Brooklyn Debate League, we've noticed that discrepancy, we've noticed that frustration with our students, and we are trying to do something radical, which is we host online scrimmages and in-person ones for those of you that are near New York City, but we host online scrimmages all year round from October through March, and we get judges who are primarily alumni to come judge those rounds. This past year, we had state finalists, national finalists, and even a national champion there. And our students who are in the Brooklyn Debate League benefited from their amazing feedback on the ballots. So whether or not they won a trophy, tell me I'm not lying, folks. You learned a lot from the judges, right? Okay, so I'm not lying. Graduating seniors, here's where you come in. Nobody in this country knows more about how to give strong feedback at Coolidge Debate than all of you. Can you raise your hand if you're a graduating senior? Cool. This message is for you. This is an opportunity to pay it forward to the next generation to make sure that they get the ballots that you wish you had. In order to do that, if you are interested, I'm inviting you to apply to be part of our judge cohort, which could be a volunteer opportunity if you're looking for service, but also we do have paid stipends if that's what you're looking for as well. What it would look like is an online tournament, or also if you're in New York City, we have in-person opportunities. And there's a commitment to come as often as you can throughout the semester, probably in the afternoons or in the evenings. It will work around your schedules, and you can come when you want to come. If you are interested in this opportunity, please come see me after this awards ceremony, and I'll give you more information. If you are not a graduating senior, raise your hand if you'd like to come back here next year. Yeah, we can clap to that. Yes, that's excellent. Here's some good news for all of you. The Brooklyn Debate League's online scrimmages are open to anyone. That's good news number one. And good news number two is all fall, October, November, and December, we are doing it all Coolidge style, aligned to next year's Coolidge topic. So if you are looking for opportunities to practice at your regional qualifiers, to practice for the Coolidge Cup, we invite you to get involved. And if you're also interested in that, come talk to me. I'll make sure that we get your contact info and fill you in. Thank you so much to everyone, and congratulations to our champions, TBD.
Yes, please take DECO up on their invitation, and let's continue reinforcing each other's good work. The 1890 Society. I'm going to start with a strange pivot. And that is, if you become a member of this society, you might find love. Those who know are already laughing, but I will tell you the story. And that is that we recently had our first of what will be many 1890 Society weddings. And it is my pleasure to present those newlyweds with a gift. So congratulations, Cyrus and Hope Ariani, on what will be an exciting life of tabbing and judging together. It's gonna be great. I hope I'm at your 50th to tell a whole bunch of tournament war stories. Join me in congratulating on their union, Cyrus and Hope. There we go. The first and last tournament director sanctioned public display of affection. I would now, at long last, we're going to hand something to you. I'd like to announce the 2025 inductees into the Coolidge Foundation's Honor Society for Speech and Debate, which is called the 1890 Society. The name 1890 Society is a reference to young Calvin Coolidge's first public speech, which was delivered on May 23rd, 1890, at the Black River Academy commencement ceremony. That was his high school graduation. The topic of the speech was oratory in history, and it was received very positively by the audience and Coolidge's teachers, and was even praised in the regional newspaper. The name of the society is obviously fitting for at least three reasons. Number one, the 1890 speech was an important moment in Coolidge's personal growth. Mr. Luddy has already talked to us about that, as a public speaker. Number two, it was delivered at a high school commencement, which is the same stage of life that our student debaters here are at. And number three, the speech itself was about the value and importance of oratory. Membership in the 1890 Society is a selective honor. It is for graduating seniors who have already, at this point, largely graduated high school, and who have demonstrated significant achievement in speech and debate, as well as a strong interest and involvement in the Coolidge Foundation debate program and the Coolidge Foundation. It is one of many ways that we hope to stay connected with all of our alumni, and there are some great opportunities besides being invited back to help assist in the running of our tournaments as they move on to exciting new things. Any of the students, well, I know who's present, I think, and who's not. So if you're present, when I call your name, obviously come up to the stage to receive your paramilitary medal. You will wear it with pride when you assist us in our militant administration of tournaments. This year's inductees, now in alphabetical order, thanks to the good work of the current 1890 Society, maybe it says no particular order, are, oh, and let me add, If you don't get in this year, we sometimes overlook people, or people continue to be involved and we were not, it's a pleasant surprise. And so we sometimes do induct folks beyond their senior year. So you are still welcome to take part in Coolidge Debate. Here we go. Please come forward to receive your award. Ethan Ackerman. Let's one clap it, and then we'll do a full round at the end. Ethan Ackerman. Justice Ariani. Aben Badachan, Ephraim Bowling, Isaiah Brown, Nathan Chin, not present but recognized, Anya Dickey, Garrett Flack, Faith Hodges, Nicholas Langkamp, Rishi Malaguri, not present, no, that's an error, Sebastian Mata, who is here, James Miller, Charlie Miller, Divya Natarajan, not present, William Pugsley, Hussam Ramadan, Kaylin Schaub, Ashvi Shayla, Dmitry Timinyanchuk, and Anya Venkat, who is here. The new members of our 1890 Society. Class photo. Congratulations again. Please do. We've already returned one lost and found item. Yes. So to give the instructions again, please come up from this side, and that's okay, we're learning. We're going to come up from this side, and then we're going to receive our award, and unless somebody calls for a class photo, you'll step down the stairs on this side and meet Reina down here. Declamation. We started with 12 declamation students and competitors, and we are now going to recognize all of them, but particularly the top 4. We have a trophy for all of them because they themselves, that top 12, over right at 200 competitors this year, entered our video contest, and so all 12 have already achieved a remarkable accomplishment by making it here. So, our finalists, we will, and then we'll slow it down a little bit and recognize our top 4, but we'll give one clap as they approach from the stage on this side for Eldon Agee, Cleo Paul, Al Zaidi, Tanish Pai, Ryan Casey, Quasi Ishan, Fevin Tessafe, Rishi Malaguri. You can come on up, come across. Come on up, come across. Next year we'll invite Vanna White to be one of the helpers to. Let's do this. Let's have the 8 of you stay on stage, and I'm going to add 4 more before we do the class photo. In 4th place in our National Declamation Finals, receiving a trophy and a prize of $250, we have Matisse Tremullo. In 3rd place, receiving a trophy and a prize of $500, Garrett Flack. In 2nd place, receiving a trophy and a prize of $750, Ephraim Bowling. And you already know and very clearly love our declamation champion for 2025 in first place and receiving a cash prize of $1,000, his own trophy, and having his name engraved on the perpetual trophy, which he can enjoy the company of for a few minutes, Christopher Pinto Spiegel. Debaters, let's talk about double octafinals, where we had a great group of students who achieved at least a 4-2 record who advanced to that level of the tournament. We will recognize our double octafinalists with a trophy, and call them up one by one, although one clap, one by one. My introduction is going to be a little bit longer because I'm going to also say their school and state as they come up, so just pace yourself on the clapping. All right, here we go. All right, double octafinalists. From his home school in Kentucky, Carlton McCormick. From his home school in Texas, Elijah Orr. From his home school in Illinois, Caleb McClure. From his her home school in Florida, Trinity Behrens. From his there was a very strong pattern. From Poland Seminary High School in Ohio, Urjan Tooley. From Cabot High School in Arkansas, Hayden Middlestat. From Raleigh Charter High School in North Carolina, Sahith Kamuju. From Wilton High School in Connecticut, Varsha Arun. From his home school in Kentucky, Tayton Fenrick. From Thunderbird High School in Arizona, Sebastian Mata. From Thales Academy Apex in North Carolina, Jonathan Mitchell. From Independence High School in Texas, Rohit Nitala. And from Prosper High School in Texas, Shrikar Chamalasetti. Your double octafinalists. This is great. It is really exciting to us as we hear the state spread to know that Coolidge debate is reaching all corners of the country. In reaching the octafinal rounds, receiving a trophy, a bid if they have not yet graduated, and it takes one bid to come to the Coolidge Cup. Although I want to start recognizing the student that earns the most bids. Let's have a bid race and compete multiple times in this Coolidge format across the country. But receiving a bid to the 2026 Coolidge Cup, which I'll start planning several days from now, and a $500 prize. We have from her home school in Texas, Melinda Wu. From his home school in Texas, Justice Ariani. From his home school in Texas, Isaiah Brown. From his home school in Wisconsin, Andrew Formo. From his home school in Texas, Bronson Gutierrez. From Ravenscroft School in North Carolina, Tanya Galat. From Arizona College Prep in Arizona, Anya Venkat. And from Solon High School in Ohio, Aditya Bellamarugu. Ladies and gentlemen, your OCTA finalists. Before you go, will you raise your hand if you are not a graduating senior? Wonderful. We hope to see you next year. And of course, quarterfinalists, semifinalists, finalists would also be eligible to return next year. All have received a bid. Our quarterfinalists each receive a $1,000 cash prize and that bid to return. Our quarterfinalists were from Milton Academy in Massachusetts, Grant Morishita. From her homeschool in Texas, Emily Rice. From his homeschool in Seamus, are you really from Massachusetts? I feel like this is an error. Is that true? That is true. All right, I learned something important. Trust Tab Room, apparently. Oh my gosh, that's the obvious joke. All right. From his homeschool in Massachusetts, Seamus McDonald. And from her homeschool in Virginia, Alithia West. Ladies and gentlemen, your quarterfinalists. Advancing to the semifinal round, receiving a $2,000 cash prize each and a bid to return to the Coolidge Cup in 2026, we have from Thales Academy Cary, Amelia Hayward, and from his homeschool in Florida, Kate's Keene. A full round of applause for our semifinalists. Semifinalists, if you will stand together on stage for the photo, that would be great. Stay on stage. And then if you'll join us down here, I want to get the semifinalists and finalists together at some point as well. If you're willing to be in the photo with them. Great. Congratulations. And now, the one great unknown that still is before us, and that is our final round. I would like to invite both of our finalists to join us on the stage. Our second place finisher and finalist receives a $3,000 cash prize and, although he's graduating, an invitation to return to the Coolidge Cup in 2026. We had a 9-judge panel, and I am very confident that this debate was closer than this record is going to indicate. But it was an 8-1 decision. And so let's recognize the accomplishment in second place, receiving that $3,000 prize, the affirmative debater from his homeschool in Washington, Nathan Chin. And your champion of the 2025 Coolidge Cup from Westlake High School in California, James Miller.